Good morning, members of the Committee of Kingdom Affairs and Interparliamentary Relations, support staff, visitors in the Tribune, radio listeners, TV viewers, those viewing via social media, and members of the media. Welcome to this committee meeting for today, Tuesday, June 18th, 2024. We've established a quorum of 3 members. Please stand for a moment of silence. Before we continue, members, I will adjourn for a brief period of 3 minutes so I can caucus with you all on a matter regarding the agenda points today. So meeting adjourned for 3 minutes. Thank you, members. After that brief adjournment, we return to our meeting. I've received notice of absence from the following committee members, MP Omar Otley and MP Christophe Emmanuel. And I've received notice of lateness from the following committee member, MP Silveria Jacobs. Are there any notifications from the floor at this time? I see none, thank you. The agenda points for this committee meeting are debriefing Tripartite and IPCO June 6th to the 10th, 2024 in The Hague, the Netherlands. And a discussion on the draft Kingdom Law dispute regulation as presented by the Parliament of Aruba. From June 6th to the 11th, 2024, the Tripartite and IPCO meetings took place in The Hague, the Netherlands. All committee members have received the agreements list for the IPCO as well as other documentation presented during these meetings. The IPCO agreements list is registered under IS 798-2023-2024, dated June 11th, 2024. Allow me first to give a brief summary of the tripartite that was held on June 6th. The goal of this meeting between delegations of the Parliaments of Aruba, Curacao, and Sint Maarten was to prepare for the Interparliamentary Kingdom consultation and discuss topics of mutual interest. During the meeting, delegations discussed agreements for the previous tripartite meeting held in October 2023. In particular, it was agreed that the topic of air traffic between the islands should be kept on the agenda of the tripartite. Additionally, the delegations reached an agreement on a draft of the dispute regulation. The draft that the Parliament of Aruba prepared will be discussed in the respective parliaments for a decision on continuing the legislative trajectory with this draft. All three parliaments are expected to inform the Parliament of Aruba on this matter by the end of this month. Mental health care and elderly care were also topics of discussion, recognizing the urgent need for increased awareness of mental health on the islands and for our Caribbean students in the Netherlands. The delegations also focused their discussions on the issues students face in the Netherlands and solutions to ensure the return of graduates to our islands. They also discussed the approval of a treaty related to the protection of personal data that will apply to the countries and its connection to the proposed draft consensus kingdom law for the protection of personal data. In addition, the delegation shared views on the need for a kingdom fund and its processes in relation to climate change. To which MP can I give the floor to make comments or remarks as it regards the tripartite portion of our trip? None? Okay. Thank you, members. I will now briefly highlight some of the points of the agreements list of the IPCO. At the beginning of the IPCO, all four delegations gave opening speeches, which were followed by the chairpersons of the Kingdom Affairs committees of the respective parliaments giving presentations on recent developments in their countries. The delegations took note of the presentation of the committee chairs and delegation leaders on the recent economic, social, and political development of the four countries within the kingdom. There was a working visit to Amsterdam North on Friday, June 7th, 2024, where the four delegations visited Sociale Markt. We toured the Sociale Markt, a social meeting and shopping place located in the church building, the Ark. The central issue discussed was the issue of poverty and poverty reduction. Clients of the social market, their food bank, have the opportunity to select and purchase food and personal care products. They can also receive support in various areas. An interesting aspect of this approach is that clients have the freedom to make choices based on a point system rather than receiving prepackaged items. There is also a clothing store run by the Salvation Army. Participants also engaged in 25-minute discussions with people who experienced challenges within the system. The delegation also visited Buurthuis van de Pek, where they received a presentation on the Wijkkliniek Zuidoost, a neighborhood clinic, a new care concept in the Netherlands for vulnerable elderly people normally admitted to a general hospital due to acute medical issues. Additionally, the delegations received various presentations from workers, board members, and volunteers of Buurthuis van de Pek, a community center supported by the community residents in its functioning. The delegations received a presentation on poverty indicators and combating poverty within the kingdom by the Social and Cultural Planning Bureau and the Social Minimum Caribbean Netherlands Commission. They also proposed assistance and methods to the delegations to assess and reduce poverty in our own countries. A highlight of the trip was that the delegation members got to meet with 25 Caribbean students in the Netherlands in 4 subgroups. We discussed the students' experiences from preparing to move to the Netherlands, studying in the Netherlands, and returning to the islands to work. Each country pledged to follow up on the concerns of their respective students. Following that, we received a presentation on crime, corruption, subversion, security, the interrelationship between the underworld and the upper world, and possible ways of cooperation within the kingdom aimed at combating these topics by the Director of the National Cooperation Against Subversive Crime. Followed by that, we had a presentation from the agenda of IPCO on the discussion of possibilities to increase the level of safe and livable neighborhoods based on a presentation on the Lac district of The Hague. The democratic deficit and possible approaches to handle this matter were also discussed in subgroups, followed by proposals during a plenary wrap-up. And of course, the featured topic at this IPCO, as with all IPCOs, was the democratic deficit in the Kingdom of the Netherlands. As it regards to the deficit, the IPCO decided the following: that the IPCO, considering whereas the Charter for the Kingdom of the Netherlands celebrates its 70th anniversary this year, whereas there is a democratic deficit within the Kingdom of the Netherlands, whereas the existing possibilities for democratic decision-making in the Charter may not yet have been fully exploited, whereas a comprehensive revision of the Charter is neither appropriate at this time nor feasible in the foreseeable future, whereas the issue of the democratic deficit has been on political agendas for years with only limited progress being made, and whereas the Kingdom Conference has not yet taken place, and whereas delegations in IPCO have jointly decided that progress must be made in the short term to reduce the democratic deficit in the Kingdom, takes note with pleasure of the intention of the Parliaments of Aruba, Curaçao, and Sint Maarten to submit a proposal for a Kingdom law pursuant to Article 12A of the Charter for the handling of disputes between the Kingdom and the countries designated by Kingdom law within a few weeks after the end of this IPCO, and looks forward to discussing this proposal. It also mandates the Presidium of the IPCO to put together a broad group democratic deficit kingdom of independent scientific experts, including a program of requirements and budgetary aspects. The requested experts must clearly map, analyze pros and cons for those involved, and summarize existing and new proposals to reduce the democratic deficit within the kingdom, as well as the scope and meaning of existing charter provisions, including Articles 3, 11, 26, 27, 38, 43, and 51, to consider and analyze. And finally, mandates the Presidium to investigate by 2025 at the latest the possibilities for a separate IPCO or other type of interparliamentary conference entirely dedicated to solving the democratic deficit in the Kingdom of the Netherlands, so that the report of the above-mentioned experts serves as a starting point for this conference that can be taken. And mandates the Presidium to send a letter to the Kingdom government with an appeal to provide clarity as soon as possible about a possible Kingdom conference to be organized with the possible participation of representatives of the parliaments. We further received a presentation on the National Museum of Slavery. On this agenda topic, the delegations received a presentation about the to-be-established National Slavery Museum in Amsterdam. The museum's quartermasters gave the presentation, and the delegations were also informed that the museum will have a local impact on all 6 islands of the kingdom. The delegations also received a presentation on the accessibility of EU funds for the countries in the Caribbean part of the kingdom. The presenters shared information about the current usage of funds, what is available, and the EU's efforts to make these funds more accessible and achievable. In addition to the Tripartite and the IPCO, this delegation from Sint Maarten also visited the National Archives of the Netherlands, which is located in The Hague. The purpose of the visit was for members of Parliament to learn about and view documents from the 19th century archives at the National Archives related to Sint Maarten, Sint Eustatius, and Saba. These documents, which were sent to The Hague in the first quarter of the 20th century, gave insight into the colonial infrastructure that was present on all 3 islands. The presentation was led by Mr. Johan van Langen, MA, Program Manager of International Heritage Cooperation of the National Archives. He was accompanied by other knowledgeable civil servants from the National Archives and other departments of the Ministry of Education, Culture and Science of the Netherlands. Mr. van Langen explained that while the National Archives holds a small collection of the historical records of Sint Maarten, a significant portion is archived in the National Archives of Curaçao. The delegation also discussed the awareness of colonialism, slavery, and the transatlantic slave trade as the development of educational material that builds pride, awareness, and understanding as it relates to this history in the Netherlands and also for Sint Maarten. The delegation also discussed the need for a national archive in Sint Maarten. Additionally, the delegation visited the Wereldmuseum Amsterdam, formerly known as the Tropenmuseum. The delegation was met by Mr. Wayne Modest, Content Director, who briefly introduced the museum. This museum was initially established as the Colonial Museum in 1926 and holds collections from various countries worldwide, although it does not currently include any pieces from Sint Maarten. However, the museum is now collaborating more with contemporary artists to address the lack of Caribbean pieces. The purpose of this visit was to view the exhibition titled Our Colonial Inheritance, which delves into the colonial history of the Dutch and their presence in Indonesia, Suriname, Curaçao, Sint Maarten, and numerous other countries. The exhibition encompasses different aspects of colonial history, including trade, products, and forced slavery, but it also looks at the continued efforts of the Dutch colonial past. The tour of the exhibition was conducted by Mr. Rick Herder. After viewing the exhibition, the delegation had a discussion with Ms. Marieke van Bommel, General Director, and Mr. Modest regarding the exhibition, the changing perspectives in the Netherlands on slavery and colonialism, the current effects of the past, and the museum's focus on educational initiatives to bring about changes in educational curricula. The parties also discussed possible ways St. Martin and the museum could work together. In this regard, two topics were mentioned, namely the celebration of Emancipation Day in St. Martin and the video footage thereof, considering that St. Martin is the only country in the Kingdom of the Netherlands where Emancipation Day is an official holiday. The other topic was SALT and its influence on and for St. Martin and its people. Civil servants of the Netherlands Ministry of Education, Culture and Science also accompanied the delegation. With that, to which member of parliament can I give the floor to make any comments or remarks regarding IPCO and other visits of the delegation? And I see MP Westcott has already requested the floor. MP Westcott?
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady of the CKAIR, and a good morning to you, a good morning to my colleagues here present and our support staff. Good morning, all. Madam Chair Lady, I want to thank you for outlining, and I want to say again, our visit to the Netherlands that included meetings of the Tripartite, so Curaçao, Aruba, and St. Martin, as well, of course, as the IPCO. And I highlight this to say that when the meeting was started earlier, I guess persons might have been wondering if no one here in Parliament had a comment on especially the Tripartite conclusions. And I really say that to inform the general public especially that at the time, so when the meeting got started, the persons, so the MPs in the meeting were also those who were at the conference. I wanted to establish that. We now have other MPs joining us. But so it's understood that we had gone through the paper, etc. And I say this again to say that just this morning, someone called and asked me if I was planning to have a press conference on our visit to the Netherlands because the person thought it important that persons be informed of the results of our meetings. And my response to the caller this morning, or the person who approached me this morning, was that, but we have been informing the public of St. Martin on our trip. And in that context, I want to say kudos to the Secretariat of Parliament, because indeed, as visits were made and all of the different things were happening, the St. Martin population was informed on this trip. So I'm also answering the question I got this morning, why was there no press conference regarding the Netherlands trip by the members of Parliament? Madam Chair Lady, on the other matter, and I'm glad that you outlined it so well as well, and that is the issue of the democratic deficit. And I want to make it known that it was on St. Martin's insistence that this matter was not only taken up on the agenda, but also that we get some kind of concrete conclusions after the many discussions. We were not, no, I can't say we. I was not necessarily in favor of the proposal, which is part of the conclusion, with respect to another group looking at the matter of the democratic deficit. But it is what it is. It's part of the conclusions. Nevertheless, we have so many reports. It has been established across the board that there is a democratic deficit. And what I would like to come to is that we really can now get to the point where proposals will be coming forward to address different aspects of the democratic deficit. There are, in my opinion, glaring matters that can be addressed that would shorten or at least reduce the impact of the democratic deficit. And then, of course, there are more long-term items that we can look at as far as the democratic deficit is concerned. Democratic deficit, what does it mean? It means that within the constellation of the Dutch Kingdom, there are, especially in the charter, areas that can allow decisions to be taken on behalf of the countries such as St. Martin without there being any parliamentary oversight. Clearly, when the Kingdom Council of Ministers take decisions, also decisions that affect the Caribbean countries, there is no parliamentary oversight. There is no kingdom parliament. So those are some of the things that we need to look at when we talk about this democratic deficit. Let us narrow that gap as much as possible. But at least with the conclusions that we have arrived at as IPCO, so as the four parliaments of the kingdom, that we can hopefully see some action in this regard. There's some timelines and dates that we have established. So I think that is important. I also look forward to coming to a conclusion on the matter of the dispute regulation, which has been on the books for very, very long, because that also narrows the gap of the democratic deficit in the Kingdom of the Netherlands. And then thirdly, Madam Chair Lady, you spoke about the National Slavery Museum, and I just would like to inform the public, and if where necessary, my colleagues as well, that that plan is in Parliament. So the plan, National Slavery Museum, is here at Parliament. It is under IS 694. In the event we ever decide that we want to take that plan and look at specific areas of the plan as Parliament. So, Madam Chair Lady, thank you for the opportunity just to address, but I again want to thank you for running over the conclusions and decisions of the tripartite as well as the IPCO. Thank you, Madam Chair Lady.
Thank you, MP Westcott. I see MP Roseberg request the floor. MP Roseberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To add to what my colleague, MP Westcott Williams, stated, it was my first IPCO experience, also first tripartite. It was interesting, first of all, to see in the tripartite the different islands, countries together, and also to see that we have the same issues, basically. And if we look at, for example, the mental health, and then the mental health on the different islands, and seeing that the facilities, for example, on St. Martin are currently full, to look at, okay, how can we make more use of the other islands and countries. That was very interesting to establish that we should make it more easier to have the mental health, especially tackled on the different in different countries, and to work more together on that topic. So that was for me an interesting matter, because I have experienced on several occasions that seeing that the mental health facilities on St. Martin don't have any space, it takes a while for different clients to be assisted in the manner that it should be assisted. Other than that, it was also a good experience to meet with the students that are studying in the Netherlands, to especially see what they're dealing with, and also to know what they think of the visits of us members of Parliament. It stuck with me that one of the students mentioned that you all just come to meet, and then when you meet, we don't hear from you all anymore. So that was something that stayed in my mind, and I do believe that we should stay in contact with the students. They made it very clear that they would like to stay connected, and that in the different experiences of IPCO, there was not really a connection with all the previous members of Parliament. So I took that with me to make sure that I will do my part in staying connected, because we can ask the students to come back home, but if there is no connection with home, how can you expect them to come back home? And that's why I also enjoyed the meeting that we had on, I think it was Monday, where we had another meeting with students and explained to them, like, okay, our vision, the different visions on, okay, when you're done studying, come back home directly, or stay in the Netherlands and gain more experience, and then eventually come back to St. Martin with what you have gained on experience, because the island needs it. Other than that, in regards to IPCO itself, It was also a new experience for me, as I mentioned. It was just nice to see that in regards to the democratic deficit, based on the documentation that I had reviewed, that there is finally more clarity and there's a concrete timeline in that regard. Also in regards to the dispute regulation, we mentioned that that will be handled pretty soon. So that will also, as MP Westcott Williams stated, tackle the democratic deficit, and I believe that's a must, because if you want to talk about equality, you should also be equal within the laws, and at this moment, that's not the case. We all know that. Once we have tackled that matter, we can make our road to equality. Also, in regards to the Slavery Museum, I got from that presentation that it was mentioned, yes, kingdom, on kingdom level, we're looking at it to tackle it from all the islands. But what stood with me is that, as you mentioned in your elaboration, St. Martin is the only country that has Emancipation Day as an official holiday. And that's why I used that moment, although I was aware that the presenters are not political minded, but I wanted to get it on the agenda, or at least mentioned it, that we cannot talk about a slavery museum if we don't have, all the countries have July 1st as a official holiday. And I have known from living in the Netherlands that it always have been a topic that, okay, should it become an official holiday? And I'm of the opinion that it should. And I know there are other people in the Netherlands with Caribbean descent and also Surinamese that believe it should become an official holiday. So to mention that during the IPCO and also getting the support from GroenLinks PvdA, but on the other hand, wondering how the current government looked at it, because also with the background of PVV, what they have mentioned in the past in regards to July 1st, it worries me. If I'm being really honest, it worries me. And also seeing the recent developments within the Netherlands in regards to July 1st and not wanting the second chamber, Bosma, to be present because of his previous remarks, those are conversations that we need to have. So I'm happy that I mentioned it and that it hopefully will be a discussion within the second chamber of the Netherlands, because we cannot have a slavery museum within the Netherlands, because that's also a discussion like, why should it be in the Netherlands? Shouldn't it be on the different islands? That's another discussion to have. But I do believe we need to have the discussion about July 1st being on all the 6 islands official holiday. Furthermore, the discussion in regards to the European funds, accessibility to those funds. I understood that in the near future we will have, I think, one of the presenters also here on St. Martin discussing the accessibility to the European funds. So I'm looking forward to that, so that we as country also would know better how to have access to those funds, and also how we can make use of the manpower from the European Union, because I think it was MP Jacobs mentioned as well that a lot of times the manpower is the issue. So I understood during that presentation that the European Union is also willing to look at providing assistance in regards to that. So I'm looking forward to that presentation. And other than that, it was a nice experience that we, other than the strict program that we had, we were busy every day. Also on the request, I think, was of MP Jacobs to visit other, like the museums that was mentioned, to get insight of what the Netherlands has of St. Martin, also to visit the Wereldmuseum, previously known as Tropenmuseum, to see how that exhibition looks in regards to the history of the Netherlands, the history that a lot of times they don't like to talk about. And I have experienced also during the different IPCO meetings and meeting with the different members of the first chamber, especially with specific parties. I can mention the PVV. I had a conversation about slavery. And what was mentioned is that I don't recognize myself in it. And that's an important discussion that we need to have, because it happened, and it's part of the Dutch history. And keep on saying that, okay, I don't recognize myself in it, or that has nothing to do with me, does not bring us closer. So instead of stepping away from that discussion, I have decided to have that discussion and also mention, like, let me teach you and let me learn from you, so that we eventually will understand each other's world, because at the end we need to work together until that is not needed anymore, if we will reach to that point. But at this moment, we are part of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. Lastly, the meetings to the different neighborhoods was also an experience to see the community effort, and also to compare that to St. Martin and see how we can also adapt to that and learn from that to also invest in our own community more. Also, during one of the IPCO meetings, I think it was the neighborhood Lac, yes, where it was explained how the community basically works together, and they have the different layers of addressing issues within the community. And you know, if you have that community involvement, I do believe you can achieve more. And I believe on St. Martin we can also make use of that more, so that the community involvement will increase. And also, if you look, for example, at crime level, certain areas, if you have people from the neighborhood itself tackling it, there is more of a connection, and I believe you can achieve more. So, summary, I gained a lot from that intensive week. It was not just a week in the Netherlands enjoying the Netherlands. No, we really worked, because a lot of times you just hear like, oh yeah, you went to the Netherlands. Did you enjoy your vacation? It was not a vacation. We have a concrete plan. We executed that plan. And also, I believe we did more than that. I think because of that, I'm still tired. But, and I think the rest of the members as well. But I do find that there are some concrete deadlines, and that there's work to be done, and we will continue doing that work. At least I will. I thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Roseberg, and thank you as well for mentioning, I forgot to mention in my opening statements, the session we had at the Cabinet of the Municipal Plenipotentiary with the students the Monday before we returned to St. Martin, actually. So that also was a usual, very engaging, different type of atmosphere, meeting with the students and young professionals from St. Martin. So thank you. Next, we have MP Kotai. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to chime in, it was my first IPCO experience as well, and it was good to see the operation at the kingdom level. But just to chime in on my fellow MP, we did meet the students, indeed, and a takeaway from myself to focus on is we know that the Netherlands has a housing crisis for years. Can we also focus on guiding our students in a better manner, not just for housing, financial literacy, mental health, due to the fact that we did meet a kind gentleman, Mr. Elijah from St. Martin, who spoke very much of his experiences of being without a house and sleeping at the station and not getting any help from our education department back in St. Martin. So I would implore that we put more focus into our students who are going up, because we do want them to come back home and not lose a connection with St. Martin. But all in all, my experience in IPCO, I'm grateful for it and would hope that we can continue to grow in the discussions with them. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Kotai. And indeed, as I myself said, you know, as someone who had a whole organization that was helping students, we've always advocated for, especially the preparation here in the schools, the guidance counselors here, to take a more active role in preparing our students for the reality of what the Netherlands is, and maybe to start it a year and a half before they even go up now, because, as you mentioned, there is a housing crisis, and it makes it that much harder, which was already hard, to find a home. I see MP Westcott would like to speak again. MP Westcott.
Thank you once again, Madam Chair Lady. Madam Chair Lady, 2 points. I want to piggyback on the comments by MP Kotai and yourself regarding the students and the situations that they face in the Netherlands. And Madam Chair Lady, the way that it was done, several students had the opportunity to meet in group sessions with the MPs of course, St. Martin, Aruba, and Curaçao. But what was like a red thread throughout the discussion is that the problems that we hear our students are facing today are the same that we were hearing, but now even more so because of the changed environment and circumstances in the Netherlands. But our students have been encountering these problems for a very long time. And it takes too much for us to have to get an understanding of especially our Dutch colleagues about the specific situation of our students. Our students are treated like international students. And yes, we have made small progress in some of the areas, the insurance, the AOV, but it took so long and so much effort to get especially the Dutch agencies to understand that, in my opinion, we have to look at, we as the kingdom have to look at our students. And of course, we are grateful for the dual funds for our children, but we have to look at the circumstances that they face in the Netherlands, which are only becoming more dire every year. Change circumstances, change government policies in the Netherlands, etc., etc. So we need to continue to hammer home that, we expect as members of the Dutch kingdom that there will be some consideration. And like the students so aptly put it, hardly any of them, so our students who are studying in the Netherlands, hardly any could for the weekend, if they need an extra meal that they can't afford, run to an aunt or uncle or mother or father. Very few. But that is across the board for most Dutch students or students of the Netherlands, because they're all Dutch, of course. So I just wanted for us to understand we got to continue to press the point that we need to address the issues that our students face in a more timely fashion, because it just goes on and on. However, the point that I also wanted to make, talking about the funding, and funding that which came up in the IPCO, funding that is available under different programs that have been established by the Dutch ministries. And Madam Chair Lady, you are also the acting, or maybe the chairperson of the VROMI Committee of Parliament. But so I have sent you an urgent letter, Madam Chair Lady, for a meeting of this committee, in or out of recess, by the way. But in all seriousness, and you have indicated you might even try to do it next week if possible, early next week. But the point that I want to make, Madam Chair Lady, is that we talked yesterday in a meeting with GEBE, for example, I picked up a reluctance of wanting to deal with the matter of alternative/renewable energy now. And I got a feeling that the reason for not wanting to deal with that now is because of the huge issues we are facing with respect to the energy crisis. All of that being what it is. Madam Chair Lady, there is, and again, we're talking about more reports and the reports that we got and etc., but the energy transition in Aruba, Curaçao, and St. Martin, that report by TNO has not only been compiled, it has been sent to the second chamber. And I do not believe that we could sit back and wait to hear what the second chamber going to say. And, we got to get ahead of this ball game. And the excuse, if I just look through that report, which, by the way, should be made available to Parliament, because that's the discussion I would like us to have in the committee meeting. And, you know, whether GB provided information to them or not sufficiently, fact is we have this report now. And it was commissioned in order to look at how the islands could get funding for this particular issue of what they call energy transition. And it has also been determined in this report that there is no blanket solution for the island. So it's as if one thing can be thrown at us and that will cover us all. Rather, the TNO is suggesting in their report that individual projects come from the island that fit the number of energy transition. So, Madam Chair, Lady, I just needed to put that in there, and I'm sure when you get my letter, you'll understand why I consider this very important. We can't do no longer as if, you know, well, they make a report, but our information is not in there. And if you see some of the graphs in that report, you know, we've got to start with making even small steps in this respect, regardless to what the bigger issue is that we're confronting now. We can't put it off until we deal with this and then say, no, we're going to look at alternative energies. A point that I also made during the meeting, and I want to mention it here again, and I look forward, MP Gomes, in your capacity as chair of the Committee of Romy, that we can really get to this matter and at least hopefully can give some direction. I don't want to say directives, but I want to say direction to the government of St. Martin where this is concerned. Thank you, Madam Chair, Lady.
Thank you, MP Westcott. And indeed, the TNO report will be booked into Parliament officially so that it can also be discussed. And you did mention that meeting to me, so we will see when best we can plan it for next week. I now give the floor to MP Jacobs. MP Jacobs, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning to you, the Griffier, and my colleagues of the CKAIR Committee and others joining us this morning. Good morning to the people of St. Martin. It's with apologies that I arrived a bit late, so I missed your opening remarks, but I'm very happy for the opportunity to be able to give my 2 cents, as they would say, based on the experience of this last IPCO, which I also must admit was a very good one. As members of Parliament representing St. Martin as one unit, it was well organized. Thank you, of course, to the Griffier, Secretary General and his staff, as well as the staff of the Plenipotentiary Minister's Cabinet and the Ministry of Osewe and all others who facilitated the visits that we had outside of the IPCO, as well as those visits and meetings organized by the Dutch delegation. It was indeed fruitful, and I must say our report, our country report, gave me hope, as well as the other countries. We're happy to hear about the progress we've been making, and so I hope that, especially since the IPCO was broadcast live, that many on St. Martin were able to follow the deliberations, the reports that were given on St. Martin, as well as the subsequent deliberations that went on. I too am very happy that, especially since I've been to IPCO meetings before in my capacity as Member of Parliament back in 2018, I believe, the discussions on a democratic deficit finally coming to a head where today I can see a proposal in my inbox from Aruba, as was promised, that will be forwarded via Aruba to the RMR, the Kingdom Council of Ministers. I think it's very important that we continue to update the public on the happenings with this regard, as it plays a big role on St. Martin, and of course ensuring that we have representation in the Netherlands when and if this comes to a debate. I also wanted to add that the presentations that we had for the IPCO were well connected to the visits that we made, but I'm very happy that we were able to get the organization via the cabinets of the Plenipotentiary Minister and the Ministry of Education, Culture, and Science to be able to visit the 2 museums that we did. We were able to note what of St. Martin's history is in the National Archives, give our impressions of what we think should happen with it, as well as see what was in the Wereld Museum, which was very little. So even though most of what is there in the archives is paper, and we have a lot of paper and documents here as well, I think it behooves us to have a follow-up with the committee that was established, the AXAR Committee for St. Martin, to see if their report is finalized and where within the planning and the proposal to government getting our own museum established here on St. Martin is on the trajectory. So with this, I'd like to find out whether out of this meeting, we're going to be requesting follow-up meetings with other committees, such as the Ministry, the Committee for Education, Culture, and Sport in this regard, as well as the Ministry of General Affairs, as it relates to this, the museum, us having a museum, the plan for one, so that we can start to safeguard some of the very valuable documents we have here that are in storage, as well as in other places, upgrade the current museum, as well as our ensuring that people have access. I was very happy to learn that the digital access, and there were links to the various museums that we could share as members of parliament, and I think that's our duty to ensure that the public knows where to find certain information, even though it's not readily available on the island. And sharing that, I think MB Roseberg already mentioned it when we talked about the Slavery Museum that we got the presentation on from the quartermasters, which I must say, the people of St. Martin, we came into the conversation late, but these are organizations that have been working for quite some years and are making headway. So we're happy that they're able to make it, and I'm trusting that the new government of the Netherlands will see through the plans and the projects that have already been laid in the interest of the shared history and the responsibility of the Netherlands in this part, as was mentioned before, of our history, which is still impacting us today. More important out of that discussion, I would really want us to go deeper into investigations into how colonialism still lives. I think that part of the discussion was not sufficient in the IPCO, and though we had great topics for discussion and debate, I don't think there was much debate. We needed to probably have less topics and more discussion so that we can have better conclusions at the end of some of the discussions. Yes, they were good discussions, but to me they really scratched the surface. The visit to the social market, which had the Salvation Army and other groups operating, showed that yes, we do have entities here on St. Martin doing it. It's not as if there is no poverty or there are no vulnerable groups in developed countries. So St. Martin is definitely no exception. The visit to the community center, also in a, like say in a workers community, was also an eye-opener in terms of seeing the hard work of a group of people, whereas in St. Martin, it's usually just one or two people in the community that are pushing the work within the community. So I believe coming out of that, as well as a presentation from Safe and Livable Communities from LAC Den Haag, I think that as St. Martin, we should request as Parliament, we should request a meeting of the Social Development Ministry to find out in what ways we can do more empowering of our community groups. We also have, I believe, a community committee specifically for district councils, which I think also, you know, we could combine that, I believe, with VSA because of the source of the funding coming from there, as well as the SMDF, and seeing how we can ensure that we streamline funding to these groups that are doing so much on the ground already. We have the Free Gun Foods, we have the different district councils within St. Martin, and so many others, daycare centers that operate separate from community councils that we can probably support better financially and structurally with what they need so that they can access more funding. So out of these meetings, I find they were not only just conducive for dialogue within the kingdom and seeing and hearing what the other countries are dealing with, but also in giving ideas on best practices in some of these countries, and we were able to also do that and ensure that there is follow-up, that there is action following it. And it starts with, for us as members of parliament, calling particular meetings. And so, especially under the education discussions that we had with the 25 students in the groups, but also more specifically with the St. Martin students, I echo the sentiments of the previous speakers who are calling for further follow-up with the Ministry of Education in terms of what can be done to give that support, not only to those who fall through the cracks, but also the free movers. And maybe we too, based on the way we've been discussing with the students, can make it our business to visit the schools and take part in those sessions that the social workers do have. And maybe have some of our former students, like recent students who are actually studying now, whether they're via video, now we know how to use technology for learning and teaching in real time, if they can't come home, to have them share these stories with the students. I know there's a VOBAS that is planned with the students. It doesn't always work out, and I am totally in agreement with this starting a year, maybe even 2 years in advance, because one of the students from Curacao did mention that it took her 2 years to secure housing, and she did that from in Curacao before coming up. So I think the realities, I think parents also have a role to play, so it's a full, government, schools, the education ministry and study financing department, but also parents and counselors that have to take part in that discussion, and notwithstanding, of course, the most important stakeholders, the students themselves, because I think most of them cannot really imagine what they're about to face when they're leaving the island. And I would like to even suggest that we organize and ensure that most of the students who have the interest to study in these areas do pre-visits in at least their pre-exam and exam years, if possible, so that they can see and hear and understand what they will be faced with as young adults in a whole new environment. I can concur that having an organization in the Netherlands also would assist. We have it in some of our universities that we have partnerships with in the US and other places. So ensuring that we have a strong student support group in the Netherlands, I think, is important, because indeed assisting from long distance will be very, very difficult. So support via the St. Martin House, but with a student support service in the Netherlands, I believe, is something that we should revisit and ensure that it's meeting the needs as was proposed or as was envisioned, since some students are clearly stating that they have a challenge with it. I believe the last topic that I didn't touch yet would be the EU funds, access to the EU funds, and while we are active members within that, the challenges of execution remain because of human HR resources, human resources, having the necessary persons. And I was happy to hear the EU representatives being willing and knowing our situation where there's a willingness to execute, but the same small group of people is also busy with whether it's trust fund projects, capital expenditure projects, and the like, and giving the necessary technical support, especially where the projects are concerned, to ensure their execution to the VROMI ministry so that we can get these projects moving in a timely fashion with the access to the funds that are there. Collaborating more with our partners within the kingdom, but also within the Caribbean, is for me key to ensure that we're not doubling efforts and wasting time, because we're facing the same challenges, and I think the solutions can be easily adapted from one small island developing state to the next. So all in all, Madam Chair, I believe that these IPCO consultations are very, very needed, that they should continue, but that we should have structured follow-up on the specific topics with the relevant ministries, stakeholders, and within the community as well, so that we can get their feedback moving forward in how we will tackle these things, both as government as well as parliament. And so you can look forward to receiving a couple of requests for meeting, maybe not you directly, but the different committee chairs, for VSA, for community development, and specifically education, culture, youth, and sport, so that we can forward these, as well as probably via the Griffier, to the Ministry of General Affairs and the Prime Minister and Department of BOC in terms of the realities of the development projects. I didn't go into the access to the funds, but I believe that that is also a topic we need to have with the government of St. Martin to ensure we don't miss the boat where that is concerned as well. So fruitful meetings, tangible results, and I look forward to the follow-up that will come from it right here in the various committees and in the Central Committee and public meetings of Parliament. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Jacobs. And actually, you took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say that as a committee, we can agree to maybe send some questions to government via the specific ministries, ECYS in particular, when it comes to the students and the difficulties that they continue to face even 20 years down the line, and also to General Affairs / BAC on the EU funding access and what the bottlenecks are with getting that, getting on the ball for that access, because I imagine there are timelines for responding to anything that is put out, and yeah, I would like to also know where the bottlenecks are with that. I don't see any other MP requesting the floor, so I want to thank the members of Parliament for the discussion. And before we continue, I'd like to just adjourn for 2 minutes. So meeting adjourned until 11:24. Welcome back, members of the committee. I see MP Jacobs is requesting the floor for some remarks. MP Jacobs?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just, in the break realized that I did miss one or two things. I didn't mention at all the very fruitful tripartite meetings. It's always good for us, and of course, in my former function, I really saw the benefit of collaborating with Aruba and Curacao. So having those meetings with Aruba and Curacao, the camaraderie, and of course, the similarities in the challenges we face, and ensuring that we are like a block, as they would say, when it comes to having the discussions. But not only that, I must say that I experienced the Dutch members of parliament as very open to listen and learn and communicate openly with us. Even, I must say, surprisingly so, the representative from the PVV party that my colleague also mentioned. Something that stuck out to me that he mentioned was that he had not learned anything about the Caribbean parts of the kingdom in his education. And I think he's maybe just a little bit older than I am, while we have always learned about the Netherlands. And so he's aware that he needs to engage. He needs to engage with the information. And that's what I got from that, interaction with him. And of course, there were other parties that I think are open to and let's say, friendly and willing to work with the Caribbean parts of the kingdom. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how the government will fill in how valuable these islands are to the Netherlands. I hope they're not looking at it in terms of dollars and cents, but in waardevol, in the sense of valuable relationships, valuable in terms of learning more about us as we know about them, and ensuring that the coloniality that exists still in these islands can be fully eradicated, so that we are governing and we are growing and nurturing our young people in the pride of who they are as individuals, first and foremost, and that there is no discrimination whatsoever to them or opportunities that are blocked based on the fact that they are in this part of the kingdom. So I do look forward to that openness continuing in the dialogues that we will continue to have individually, but also as factions and as the Parliament of St. Martin with our kingdom partners, both here in the Caribbean and across the Atlantic. We should not let the positivity go to waste, because it can easily go a few steps backwards. But I know there's been a big debate about, yeah, how will this 200 million be spent and why is it in the Netherlands? If we do not ensure that the awareness of the real history takes place in the Netherlands, then we will never achieve what we need to achieve. And I was very happy to see when we visit the National Archives that there are Caribbean-based professors working to ensure that the information is translated into the curriculum, and that students in the Netherlands are now learning about the real history of this kingdom that we all inhabit and that we have a responsibility to each other for according to our statute thus far. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I look forward for that continued collaboration.
Thank you, MP Jacobs. MP Roseberg, you had some additional remarks?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. It's basically confirming what MP Jacobs said. I wasn't sure if she was going to mention it, but in the last sentence she did, especially the education part. I can remember when I used to study in the Netherlands, there was never any word about the history, the rich history of the Netherlands in regards to slavery. And when we visited the National Archives and they mentioned that they are now having that in the curriculum, it was good news. And I also was wondering, like, okay, is it only in the schools in Randstad, like in the cities, or also abroad, like separated from the Randstad, like the smaller areas? How do you say that? Yes, the towns, indeed. Thank you. So to hear that it was also in the towns, that was like a nice development. you know, it's a start. We're not there yet, but I do believe once you have it in the educational system, then you can really have that conversation that we need to have. So that's the ad that I would like to give. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Roseberg. So thank you again, members, on the deliberation over agenda point 1. Now, we were initially supposed to go over to what would have been agenda point 2, which is a discussion on the draft Kingdom Law dispute regulation as presented by the Parliament of Aruba. However, it was mentioned already in the previous agenda point that during the tripartite, the delegation agreed to a draft Kingdom Law on this topic as proposed by the Parliament of Aruba. The last version has been shared with members of the committee under embargo, which means that you are not to share the document with anyone at this time, including faction staff. But what we have discussed, of course, off-air is that it will be forwarded to CC, to Central Committee, for further handling on the topic so that we can comply with what was agreed upon in tripartite and deliver our final report and findings to the Parliament of Aruba before the end of this month. So the proposal, just to make note for the public's edification, the proposal is in line with the 3 requirements that were established during the IPCO of 2015, namely, that the dispute regulation should be, 1, the Supreme Court or an independent common dispute settlement court to be established, or a Supreme, thank you, thank you. So the Supreme Court or an independent common dispute settlement court to be established, or a Supreme College of State must be designated as the body charged with dispute settlement for the Kingdom of the Netherlands. That the dispute regulation must be made by means of a binding decision with the possibility of conflict resolution prior to that. And that the scope of the dispute regulation should cover strictly legal disputes with regards to statutory provisions. So the draft that we have received from Aruba falls in line with all these agreements made at previous IPCOs, and therefore that is what we will be forwarding to Central Committee for further handling, and then thereafter it will continue the legislative trajectory. So with that, there is then, excuse me, MP Jacobs, you had a remark?
Yes, thank you. I had a question, Madam Chair, regarding maybe to the Secretary General in terms of when we go to the Central Committee meeting, will it then be shared with the other members of Parliament with the same instructions?
It will be shared, but whether or not that will remain under embargo is to be decided. So we will inform members of the committee and the other members of Parliament as well on what that trajectory will be. I believe the review will be checking with the Parliament of Aruba directly. And in terms of a timeline, the meeting, we agree that it will be handled before the end of June. So before recess is established, it should have been handled already. Yeah, thank you. Any other remarks from the floor? No? With that, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of this meeting, and I thank you all for your participation, and I hereby close this meeting.